When do you see this? Every day you ask yourself, what's going on? On this occasion, they tried to fill up and transport fuel from Belarus to Russia. What do you think happened to that fuel? Well, you're seeing it right now. And that's because Lukashenko, the dictator of Belarus, tried to transport this material, this fuel sent by a tanker train with 15 gasoline cars, but it barely entered Russia. Well, it would have been destroyed in an impressive way. Well, today now. Let's get into the details. Because they're telling them from Poland, the people who live there, to the Poles who live in Belarus, get out immediately. Leave that place. What's going on? Well then, Poland issues an urgent warning to its citizens in Belarus. The Polish embassy in Minsk asked all its Polish citizens to leave the country immediately today. According to the message, it emphasizes that this evacuation may become impossible in the near future. Why? Well, what's coming, right? The situation is deteriorating due to a drastic decline in security, and evacuation could become significantly difficult or even impossible later on. They said the Polish embassy issued that warning. Return now, Polish citizens, because it might be impossible later. NATO and Russia are escalating tensions following several Russian planes and drones violating European airspace. And this is causing enormous concern in Eastern Europe. In this situation, there's also been an attack called the Deepstrike, an attack by Ukraine against Russia. Let's go into the details of what's happening. First, we see the train cars I mentioned, the cars that have been destroyed, which were carrying fuel from Belarus to Russia. There they are. The train cars were left completely burned. There you can see another image of that same event, of that same situation. Here's another image. Well, obviously it's been tremendous, right? There it is. Listen to the gas coming out. Listen. Well, impressive what has been happening in this region of the world. Let's go into more details. According to what they know, the attacks that have been carried out, aside from the wagons, there is an attack called Deepstrike, an attack that focused on Russia's oil infrastructure, causing the fuel crisis to worsen right now over there in Russia, okay? Where the attacks like the one on that rail car were tremendous. As other attacks are happening, they say the enemy's military-industrial complex capabilities have been reduced. So, the fuel that Russia uses for battle has been significantly reduced. In less than 2 months, 85 high-value targets have been attacked, including 33 military facilities inside Russia and 52 industrial facilities, according to Ukrainian command data. Has the campaign been that effective? The effectiveness of the so-called deep strike, that's what they call it, right? Like a deep attack. It has been so effective that the Russian advance is already starting to slow down, to the point where even Russian civilians are running out of fuel. The Russian media outlet called Kommersant reported that 50% of the gas stations in Crimea and Sevastopol have simply stopped selling gasoline. This reveals the significant impact on the shortage of this fuel. Russia has been responding in this way. What Russia is doing now is restricting sales, prohibiting, for example, the export of gasoline, and limiting diesel. The same Deputy Prime Minister, Alexander Novak, would have also given this warning. It won't be possible to sell fuel to other countries, or it will be in dribs and drabs, just a little at a time. President Zelensky stated that the country has the capacity to manufacture 8 million drones per year. They went from 1 million drones, which was surprising, to making 1 million more impressive. But now they're announcing that Ukrainians have the capacity to manufacture 8 million drones a year. This changes and repositions Ukraine in a very different way. President Zelensky said the country can produce 8 million drones annually, although more funds are still needed to reach the goal they want. Ukrainian authorities aim to weaken Russia's military response. If they have less fuel, their response is slower, and so, well, that gives the Italians a strategic advantage. Fuel, response is better, gives an advantage, response is slower, then. According to what Energy Aspects reports, Russia's total refining capacity dropped by about 20%, which is equivalent to a loss of 1.1 million barrels per day. Gasoline production also dropped by 10%. More than 300 gas stations in Russia stopped operating, while regions imposed purchase limits, only between 10 and 20 liters per person. In the occupied territory, including Crimea and Sevastopol, half of the gas stations have stopped selling gasoline. This also worsens the crisis and creates long lines. Currently, there's no information on when things will return to normal. Ukraine is likely trying to buy time, strengthen its movement, and boost its negotiating power. Meanwhile, according to reports, Hungarian drones have entered Ukraine. It appears he conceded, hopefully. Be careful with that, because it's Zelensky. He's accusing a NATO country of sending drones into Ukraine. Zelensky is denouncing a violation of airspace. From Hungary, be careful with that, from Hungary. It's the first time this has happened. This is the first known incident of this kind of situation between both countries, which marks a new point of tension in the region. Zelensky said the drones may be scouting industrial sites near Ukraine's border. Zelensky reacted immediately. He says he is seeking to verify all available information to prepare an urgent report and have this recorded. The harsh response from Budapest, says Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó, rejected the accusations, saying that they are not responsible. He said Zelensky is going crazy due to his anti-Hungarian obsession, according to this person. Well, that's the response in a context where Hungary is becoming closer to Russia, just like Slovakia. And in one of those situations, they might trip up NATO in anything that's happening right now. Meanwhile, NATO is closely watching all those kinds of events, I imagine, to see what happens. What are the chances Hungary gets removed from NATO if this continues? NATO is closely monitoring everything that's happening, but also, well, without giving any details about what their next step will be. I mean, what steps will Russia take? What steps will NATO take in any case? It will be interesting to come back to this topic later, but pay attention to what's happening. Pay attention to what's happening with this idea of abandoning Belarus, with this idea of the so-called deep strike, Ukraine's deep strike strategy. Let's move on to other important matters.